Welcome back to the deep dive, everybody. This one is really, really interesting. It's all about how to really understand ourselves better, which I know is something a lot of us are always working on. And this one idea, this whole concept of you don't know what you don't know, really jumped out at me. It's about how the stuff we're not even aware of, the things we don't realize we're missing, can have a huge impact on, well, everything, but especially how we feel emotionally.
It's true. We can be really smart, really self-aware. We can think we've got ourselves figured out, but we all have these blind spots, these areas where our understanding of ourselves, of how we react to things, it's just not complete. It might even be totally off.
Yeah.
And these hidden gaps can really mess with our emotional well-being.
Absolutely. I mean, hasn't everyone had that experience of being stuck in a rut or you have a reaction to something that just comes out of nowhere and you think, whoa, where did that come from? It's like there's this whole unseen part of the map, right? These blind spots, as the material calls them, that are influencing us in ways we can't even begin to guess.
Precisely. And what's really fascinating here is that these aren't just empty spaces, like, oh, there's some missing information here. These blind spots can actually work against us, against our emotional peace. Kind of unsettling to think that our minds might be trying to protect us in a way, but the end result is actually causing more problems than it's solving.
Yeah. Right. Like a well-intentioned but totally messed up security system. So for this deep dive, what I really want to do is shine a light on this hidden territory, give you, the listener, some real practical ways to start uncovering these blind spots in your own life. This isn't about feeling bad about what we don't know. It's about getting a much clearer picture of ourselves so we can finally have that emotional freedom we're all looking for. Okay, so we know these blind spots are lurking. We know they can cause problems. But the sources get into the dangers of just staying in the dark about them. It's not just, oh, I'm missing out on some personal growth. They actually say it can really erode mental health, that it can create this invisible prison. Those are some pretty strong words.
They are, but they emphasize just how serious this can be. When you refuse to look at those blind spots, those uncomfortable truths about yourself, well, it's like this backlog builds up, all these unresolved emotions, all these unexamined reactions, and they don't just disappear. They weigh on us, make us feel exhausted, resentful, even emotionally numb, and we don't know why. It's like carrying around this heavy backpack full of invisible weights.
But the sources point out something really important. It's not just how we feel inside. These blind spots actually affect how we see the world around us, which can lead to all sorts of misunderstandings and bad decisions.
Totally. Our perceptions, how we see things, are filtered through our beliefs and assumptions. And a lot of those are formed unconsciously, right there in those blind spots. So we might misinterpret what other people say or do. We make bad judgments about situations and we react in ways that are out of proportion or just unhelpful. It's like looking at the world through a distorted lens, not realizing that your view is totally skewed.
You know, the phrase that really got me was slow leak in emotional resilience. It's not always this big dramatic crisis. It's this constant subtle wearing down of our ability to cope with things, to bounce back from challenges. And then this idea that we're trying all these solutions that don't work because we're not dealing with the real issue. It's like trying to fix a flat tire when the real problem is, I don't know, your engine's blown a gasket or something.
That's a great analogy. You tried different things to feel better, right? You tried different ways of coping. You look for validation from other people. But if you don't address those underlying blind spots, it's all kind of superficial. It's not really going to get you where you want to be. Like the sources say, the things we try so hard to avoid, those are often the keys to actually feeling better in the long run.
The sources tell this story about Sarah to really bring this to life. She's a perfect example of how hard it can be to face those parts of ourselves we don't know. Can you tell us what happened with her?
Sure. So Sarah really thought she knew herself pretty well. She did all the right things, journaling, self-help books. So when her therapist suggested she might have some blind spots that were affecting her relationships, Sarah pushed back. She was convinced that there wasn't anything about herself that she didn't already know.
So she thought she was already doing the work. How did she try to uncover those blind spots?
Well, she did something pretty direct. Maybe a little too direct. She decided to ask her friends for brutal honesty about her flaws, thinking this would give her proof, either to confirm what her therapist said or prove him wrong. And her friends, even though they were a little hesitant, they did give her their perspective. They told her that she could be dismissive, especially when she was upset, that she often played the victim, and that she tended to twist conversations to make herself look good.
And I'm guessing she didn't take that feedback too well.
No, not really. Instead of actually considering what her friends were saying, she felt attacked. She got defensive and even lashed out, accused her friends of being jealous, of not understanding her. And then, get this, she started pointing out their flaws in return. So, what was supposed to be this exercise in self discovery, well, it turned into a bunch of conflicts, and the story says it actually damaged some friendships.
So instead of getting some insight, she ended up making things worse with the people in her life. What are the takeaways from Sarah's experience, according to the sources?
Well, the sources highlight three crucial lessons. The first is this: the hardest truth isn't what you don't know, it's what you refuse to believe. You see, Sarah thought blind spots were just about missing information, like, oh, I need to fill in this gap. But the real issue was that she was really resisting any truth that challenged how she saw herself. It wasn't even about her friends being honest, it was about the possibility that her self image might be wrong, that it might crumble. The sources say that the most damaging blind spots, they're not just gaps, they're the lies we cling to so hard, the lies we tell ourselves, that when the truth comes along, it feels like a betrayal.
That's a really good point. It's not just about not knowing, it's about actively pushing away certain things. What's the second lesson?
The second lesson is this: the people who expose your blind spots will feel like enemies. That's how you know they're right. When Sarah's friends pointed out her flaws, her immediate reaction was negative. And that defensiveness, the sources say, it often means they've hit a nerve. They found something you really don't want to see. The more a truth threatens who we think we are, the more our brain screams danger, and we want to reject it. They say the people who show us our blind spots, they're not trying to hurt us, they're actually showing us this prison we've built around ourselves. But when we react with hostility, we're essentially locking ourselves further inside.
So it's almost backward. The more defensive we get, the more likely it is there's something there we need to look at. So let's take away from Sarah's story.
The third lesson is this: the quest for self-awareness can be the ultimate ego trap. You see, Sarah didn't really want to discover her blind spots. She wanted to disprove them. She approached it like she was trying to win a case in court, not like a scientist actually looking for truth. The irony is, the harder we try to prove we're already whole, already self-aware, the more fragmented we actually become. True growth, according to the sources, it doesn't begin by saying, I know myself. It starts with being humble enough to consider, maybe I'm lying to myself, and if you can't sit with that uncertainty, you'll likely stay stuck.
So Sarah's experience shows how our defenses can be the biggest obstacle to uncovering our blind spots. And this leads to the next thing the sources talk about, the core problem of these defense mechanisms, which they call a brutal paradox. Can you explain what they mean by that?
Sure. The brutal paradox is that the very things we develop to protect ourselves, to protect our ego or sense of self, well, those can actually be harmful to our emotional well-being. These defense mechanisms, they're designed to filter out those uncomfortable truths. And that's how those blind spots are created. So what we don't know, it's not just missing information. It's like this whole parallel reality. It's all our flaws, our ingrained patterns, the ways we deceive ourselves. And it's all quietly influencing us, affecting our decisions and behavior without us knowing.
It's like our minds built this elaborate system to shield us from pain, but in doing that, it's also shielding us from growth, from truly understanding ourselves. The sources talk about these psychological tripwires, these things that set off our resistance when a blind spot's even hinted at. What are some examples?
Ugh, they show up in so many ways. It might be that flash of anger, that annoyance when someone offers what feels like criticism, even if they meant well. Or you might just dismiss any feedback as wrong or biased. Maybe you change the subject, turn the attention back to the other person, or just shut down completely. These are all little red flags that a blind spot's been touched, and your defenses are kicking in to protect how you see yourself.
And the sources say that the most dangerous blind spots are the ones we've been trained not to notice, the ones woven right into how we see ourselves. That's really interesting.
It is. Think about it. Over time, we build this story about who we are. We create an identity that feels consistent, acceptable to ourselves and other people. Anything that threatens that story, any flaw, any inconsistency, it gets pushed down, ignored. We're so invested in keeping this self-image intact that we literally become blind to anything that contradicts it. That's why personal growth can be so hard. It often means taking apart those beliefs we've held about ourselves for so long, more than just learning new things. You got to be willing to question the very foundation of who you think you are.
This whole idea of questioning your identity reminds me of that analogy they use, the white bread illusion. Can you explain that? It sounds like a really helpful image.
Yeah, I like that one. Imagine you walk into a grocery store. And all the loaves of bread are in plain white wrappers. No labels, no ingredient lists. You pick up what you think is your usual white bread, but here's the thing. They're always restocking with different types of bread. One day it's sourdough, the next it's rye, then maybe it's this dense multigrain. But since the packaging always looks the same, you don't notice. Maybe you start having digestive issues, so you blame bad luck or stress, never realizing the problem isn't the bread itself, it's that you don't know what ingredients you're actually eating.
So that consistent white packaging, that's like our emotional patterns, right? Our reactions triggers habits, especially in relationships. Things that feel consistent on the surface. But underneath those ingredients, the causes, the beliefs, they might be different without us realizing it.
Exactly. That fight you always have with your partner, that anxiety that pops up out of nowhere, that general feeling of frustration, they're not random events. They could be signs of those hidden ingredients you haven't acknowledged. And that rotating shelf, well, that's your mind, constantly switching things around, keeping certain truths hidden to protect your self-image. That makes it even harder to see the real issue.
And like they say, the cruel twist is the more sure we are that we know our own bread, the less likely we are to even question why we keep having these negative experiences. So real emotional well-being starts when we stop blindly trusting the familiar packaging and we start looking at what's actually on the shelf, those hidden ingredients.
Exactly. It's about getting curious about what's going on inside, being willing to look past those surface level emotions and reactions.
Okay, that all makes sense. But how do we actually start to uncover those hidden shells, those unlabeled packages? The sources give 5 really practical strategies to expose those blind spots. Let's go through them one by one. The first one is hunt your own defensive reflexes, like a spy. I love that. What does that actually look like?
Well, it's about shifting your attention. Instead of trying to find those blind spots directly, which is impossible because you can't see them, you start noticing when you become defensive. When you try to avoid a truth, it's like becoming a secret agent, a spy, but your mission is to study your own reactions. Your defensiveness is the clue, the trail leading to those hidden truths.
So you're looking for those little signs, the signals that you're getting close to a blind spot. What are some of those alarms, those defensive replies we should be on the lookout for?
Oh, there are tons. Let's say someone says, "You seem really stressed lately." Do you immediately jump in with, "I'm fine"? That could be you denying how you really feel. Or do you try deflecting with something like, "Well, you're one to talk"? Shifting the focus off of yourself, maybe you justify it, "I'm just really busy right now," could be a way to avoid acknowledging a bigger problem. These things aren't necessarily wrong on the surface, but they're breadcrumbs leading to what you're trying to avoid.
So it's not that being defensive is bad. It's just that it's a signal that there might be something deeper going on. It's like our internal alarm system going off, warning us that we're getting close to something we don't want to see. What's the second strategy to expose those rotating shelves?
The second strategy is to reverse engineer your emotional deja vu. This one's about paying attention to when you feel certain things instead of focusing on why you feel them. It's about recognizing those patterns. When does that same bad feeling tend to show up again?
So instead of just thinking, ugh, I'm frustrated, you start to notice the specific situations or the people that bring up that frustration over and over again. Can you give us an example?
Sure, let's say you get frustrated every time your partner asks, "How was your day?" Instead of focusing on the frustration itself, pay attention to when it flares up. Is it right after they ask? When they pause, waiting for an answer? When you hear yourself giving the same old vague answer, the pattern might not be in the emotion itself, but in that automatic repetition of the whole situation and how you react to it. Something you've probably gotten so used to that you don't even question it anymore.
That's really interesting. You're not just analyzing the feeling itself, you're looking for the pattern. What's the third strategy for uncovering those blind spots?
The third strategy is to let people's misunderstandings of you teach you. This one might be hard because it means not immediately correcting someone when they get you wrong. Instead, you study why their perception feels so threatening.
That's a tough one. Our instinct is to defend ourselves, to make sure people see us correctly. How can that help uncover our blind spots?
Well, when you stop and ask yourself why a certain misperception bothers you so much, you can learn a lot about your own insecurities, about those hidden beliefs. For example, let's say a coworker says, "You're so quiet in meetings," and you immediately think, "No, I'm just being strategic." Okay, fine. But ask yourself, what's so bad about being seen as quiet? Does quiet equal powerless in your mind? What would it cost you to just let them believe that for a little while? The fear that comes up, the discomfort, it can reveal what's on that hidden shelf, those beliefs you're trying to avoid.
So their misunderstanding is like a mirror, showing you things about yourself you might not want to see.
What?
That's a cool way to look at it. What's the fourth strategy?
The fourth one is to preserve your worst interpretations like evidence. This means holding on to those thoughts that make you feel ashamed, the ones that feel really negative, even upsetting. They even call them shelf rotation blueprints.
These are usually the thoughts we try to push away, right? Why would we want to hold on to them?
Because those thoughts, as uncomfortable as they are, often reveal the rules you're living by. They show you the beliefs that are driving your behavior and creating those blind spots. Let's say you have a fight with someone and you think they're going to leave me if I ever show them I need anything. Instead of pushing that thought away, freeze it, trace it back. When did you decide that showing neediness equals abandonment? The answer might be in past experiences or really deep beliefs that you've never really examined. It's about uncovering those unspoken transactions you've been making with yourself and with others for years.
So those shameful thoughts are like clues to those deeper fears and assumptions. It's like collecting evidence to understand the hidden logic of your own mind. What's the last strategy for exposing that rotating shelf?
The fifth one is to schedule a weekly misery audit. This one's about being ruthless. Set aside time each week to really catalog everything that made you miserable that week. Then look for patterns, for those common threads running through them.
A misery audit that sounds intense, but I get it. How does that help you see those blind spots?
Well, by looking across all the different things that caused you to stress, even if they seem totally unrelated, you start to see those recurring themes, the hidden rules that are governing your emotions. They give an example of someone having a bad week that included their friend canceling plans, a vague email from their boss that sounded kind of critical, and someone cutting them off in line at the coffee shop. Totally separate things, right? Annoying, but whatever. But when you do your misery audit, you realize all three actually triggered the same feeling: disrespect. This points to a deeper rule, maybe something like, I need to be in control of how others treat me. That rule is driving your reactions without you even knowing it.
It's about connecting the dots between things that seem random to uncover those deeper beliefs, those hidden sensitivities. And the sources say there's a kind of twist that applies to all these strategies. Right? What is it?
The twist is that you're not necessarily discovering brand new blind spots you never knew existed. You're more like catching your mind in the act of hiding them. These strategies, it's not about having this big epiphany about something you never knew. It's about becoming aware of how you avoid those truths. It's like you're doing this forensic counter-surveillance on your own mind.
I love that. It's not about finding something invisible. It's about seeing the ways you've been keeping it hidden. Okay, so the sources move on to this concept of the blank packaging of emotions. When we're talking about blind spots, what does that analogy represent?
Blank packaging is a way to understand how those familiar emotions we have, they can actually hide really different underlying issues. Remember those plain white bread wrappers? This time they might have sourdough, rye, even moldy bread, but on the outside they all look the same. Well, emotions are like that: anger, anxiety, even numbness. They can trick us into thinking we're dealing with the same problem when underneath, what we're actually feeling might be totally different.
So you might label something as stress, but under that, there could be this fear of failure or a feeling of being totally overwhelmed or even resentment you haven't admitted to yourself. That label keeps you from really looking deeper.
Exactly. And that blank packaging, it's not harmless. The sources even call it a lie because it stops you from seeing the true ingredients of your emotional experiences. You might react to anger in a certain way, thinking it always means the same thing, but sometimes that anger is just a cover for hurt or fear.
So how do we start to unwrap this blank packaging?
Hmm.
How do we get to the heart of what we're actually feeling? The sources give us 5 strategies for this. What's the first one?
The first one is to conduct a label swap on your go-to emotions. This means when you feel that familiar emotion coming up, you force yourself to rename it. For example, instead of just stress about work, reframe it as, I'm terrified of being exposed as incompetent. Or instead of annoyed with my partner, try, I'm actually grieving the fantasy version of them I had in my head. You see, your usual label might not be wrong, but it's probably vague. It's a shield, protecting you from a sharper truth.
That's really interesting. You're trying to bypass those automatic thoughts and come up with a more accurate interpretation. What's the second strategy for unwrapping that blank packaging?
The second strategy is to map the texture of your reactions. This means instead of focusing on the why, pay attention to how the emotion feels in your body. What's the physical sensation?
So not just I'm angry, but my jaw is clenched, my chest is tight. How can paying attention to those physical sensations help us?
Our bodies often tell us what's really going on before our minds catch up. For example, when you feel angry during an argument, maybe your jaw clenches. That tension could be a sign of fear or vulnerability that you're not processing, or that anxiety about a deadline. Maybe it feels like your shoulders are up around your ears, your neck is tight. That might be about feeling overwhelmed, burdened, more than just general anxiety. The blank packaging of anger or anxiety can hide those more specific, more vulnerable feelings like shame or betrayal that your body is trying to communicate.
So our bodies are giving us clues about what's hiding beneath the surface. What's the third strategy for getting past that blank packaging?
The third strategy is to isolate the aftertaste of your emotional experiences. This means looking beyond the initial intense feeling and noticing what's left behind, maybe 20 minutes later, after the main intensity has
In
passed.
20 minutes. Why that time frame?
It's just a guideline, really. Enough time for the initial rush of emotion to fade so you can see those more subtle residual feelings. Like, let's say you have this outburst of righteous anger at your friend. Afterwards, maybe there's this hollowness or guilt. That aftertaste could be the real emotion. Regret for how you expressed yourself, maybe fear of hurting the friendship. It surfaces after the anger is gone. Or after being super stressed and productive at work, maybe you suddenly crash. That could be resistance to the work or feeling overloaded, not just physical exhaustion. The blank packaging of the initial emotion goes away, and what's left is the truth it was hiding.
The immediate emotion is like a distraction, and those lingering feelings are the real story. What's the fourth strategy?
The fourth strategy is to play emotional archaeology on recurring fights. This means taking a conflict from your past, especially one that keeps coming up in different ways, and stripping away all the details. Just try to find the core issue, the root of the problem.
So it's like getting to the heart of a pattern that keeps repeating.
All right.
How do you strip away the context?
Look for the themes, the complaints, the things that keep coming up no matter what the actual argument is about. Like a fight that seems to be about you never help with the chores might actually be about I feel like a burden when I have to ask for help. Or a fight about you're always on your phone could be about I'm afraid I'm not interesting enough for you. It can be unsettling to realize you've been having the same fight for years, just disguised in different ways.
So the topic of the fight changes, but the emotional dynamics are the same, hidden under that blank packaging of the surface argument. What's the last strategy for unwrapping those emotions?
The fifth strategy is to introduce a misery mirror into your routine. This means keeping track of those bad moods, those negative experiences, but you describe them as if you were a detached observer, even kind of judgmental.
A misery mirror. That sounds even more intense than the misery audit. How does this help?
Well, when you look at yourself from that outside perspective, it can bypass those internal justifications, those stories we tell ourselves to feel better. Instead of writing in your journal, I was sad today, try something like, subject spent most of the day scrolling on their phone, avoiding eye contact, and then blamed their mood on hormones. Or instead of, I snapped at my kid, try, adult lashed out at a small child who just needed help, likely due to their own unresolved feelings of inadequacy. This third person view can be really eye opening. It cuts through the blank packaging of your usual thoughts and forces you to see things more objectively.
So you're seeing your emotions and reactions more clearly without those filters and defenses. The big takeaway from all these strategies is that those emotions we think are protecting us might actually be censoring us. That's a big one.
It is. It shows how our own internal mechanisms can hide the truth from us, even from ourselves.
Now, the sources move on to the hidden ingredients list. This is the idea that our deepest triggers, our emotional patterns, they're there, but we're not looking at them. It's like they're written in invisible ink. The key to seeing them is to shine a light on them, pay attention, and then you can see the real reasons behind all these issues we think are just random. How do we actually start to see those hidden ingredients?
The sources have 5 more strategies to reveal that hidden list. The first one is to conduct a shadow motive audit on your best behaviors. This means looking at your good traits, your virtues, and asking yourself, what's really driving those?
That's another one that feels counterintuitive. Why would we need to examine the shadow motives behind them?
Because sometimes those good behaviors come from fear or insecurity or past trauma, not from a genuinely positive place. For example, maybe you're always on time for everything. Looks like responsibility, right? Respect for others. But maybe if you look deeper, it's a terror of being seen as unreliable. Maybe because your childhood was chaotic and unpredictable. Or you never complain, which seems patient and resilient. But what if the real reason is a fear that speaking up will make people reject you, that you won't be loved? The surprise here is that our biggest strengths might actually be covering up vulnerabilities that we haven't even admitted to ourselves.
That's a good point. It's like we're overcompensating for something we haven't even acknowledged. What's the second strategy for finding those hidden ingredients?
The second strategy is to reverse engineer your unexplainable aversions. This means looking at your irrational dislikes, those strong reactions you have, and seeing them as clues to those buried rules, those past experiences that shaped you.
So those little things that just bug us, those could actually be important signs.
Exactly. Maybe you hate it when someone tells you to calm down. Reverse engineer that. Maybe it's because as a kid you were always being silenced. Or maybe you have a strong reaction to disorganization. It's not just that you like things neat, it's that you're afraid of losing control, because maybe in the past that had really bad consequences. What's surprising is realizing that what we dismiss as just a pet peeve, it's actually a coded message, a distress signal from our own past.
Fascinating. Our little annoyances can actually tell us a lot about our deeper emotional landscape. What's the third strategy?
The third strategy is to study the deleted scenes of your memories. This means paying attention to what you don't say when you tell stories about your life. Those things you consistently leave out.
It's not just about what we remember, it's about what we forget or what we choose to omit. How does that show us those hidden ingredients?
Those edits we make to our memories, they're often there to protect how we see ourselves, to keep up a certain story about who we are. For example, maybe you always talk about how toxic your last job was, how terrible everyone was, but you never mention how your own behavior might have contributed, like refusing feedback or gossiping. Or you talk about how cold and distant your ex was, but you leave out the times he shut down their attempts to connect. By noticing those things you always edit out, you can start to see the hidden parts of the story, your role in it all, the parts of yourself you don't want to admit to.
Our memories aren't always objective. We shape them to fit how we want to see ourselves. What's the fourth strategy?
The fourth strategy is to decode your scripted apologies. Look at those automatic apologies you use, the phrases you always reach for, and see what you're defending against. What are you avoiding taking responsibility for?
Our apologies can be that revealing. I usually just think of them as a way to smooth things over.
Well, that might be the intention, but the words we use can show those underlying defenses, those vulnerabilities. Like saying, sorry if I seemed harsh, that's not really taking responsibility. It's protecting you from being seen as cruel. Or, sorry you feel that way, that shifts the blame onto the other person. The truth is, sometimes our apologies are more about protecting ourselves from shame or blame than they are about genuine regret. They're like little cover stories for the parts of ourselves we don't want to show.
Wow, they're like little windows into our defense mechanisms. What's the last strategy for uncovering those hidden ingredients?
The last one is to mine your fantasies for hidden contracts. This means really paying attention to your daydreams.